Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be with you here today, and I thank sincerely for the invitation to come. It's wonderful to see so many of you interested in a paramount important subject, partnership for change. The topic I'll address here today is of major importance. I don't have to tell you. Women's lack of access in decision-making in politics and the economy is one of the most pressing contemporary global issues, as we know. Economic reform programs that favor domestic and global market expansion rather than social welfare agenda and policy response to global problems such as climate change and are currently not only reconfiguring patterns of natural resource use and governance, they have also had profound effects on people's lives. These processes are inflicted with gender narratives that produce inequalities and exclusions. At the same time, sustainable development policy initiatives that seek to ameliorate environmental degradation and its negative livelihood effects have created new gender power relations. Indeed, sustainable development initiatives targeting women as a homogeneous and as an undifferentiated social category have unintentionally intensified social and gender injustices. Unequal power relations and access to resources between men and women often result in different levels of vulnerability to risks of natural disasters such as droughts, floods and storms. Women are affected differently and more severely because of fixed gender roles, discrimination and poverty. Forgive me for being so serious, but all these are facts. They have fewer rights than men to land, credit and capital, and would facilitate adaptation to climate change. That is to say, that would facilitate adaptation to climate change. Given the scale of the problem, there is a need to address gender inequality from a crisis perspective. Fortunately, women's lack of access to resources, decision-making and human rights has finally been recognized as a priority in international institutions. As development agendas such as the UN Millennium Development Goals on gender equality, the Security Council Resolution 1325 or 1325 on women, peace and security, or recent UN report on women, agriculture and poverty reduction is a case in point. To succeed, these initiatives require far-reaching cooperation between so-called developed and developing countries. The first of the UN Millennium Development Goals is to ensure that by 2015, children everywhere, boys and girls alike, will be able to complete a full course of primary schooling. And the second one, that gender disparity in primary and secondary education be eliminated in all levels of education. It is imperative that these goals are being seriously worked on and eventually met. It will be, as former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan put it more than a decade ago, a test of our entire international community. From the beginning, UNESCO and its partners pledged support for this initiative, which recognizes that the key to empowering succeeding generations lies in educating children today. The tens of millions of children, 2/3 are women or girls, without education are being denied a fundamental human right spelled out in international instruments their governments have signed on to, such as the Universal Declaration for Human Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, namely the right to education. They are also denied the core principle of the United Nations Charter, the equal rights of men and women. It's about being able to earn an income, about protection against violence, about taking part in economic and political decision-making. And it is about educating children to do the same and their children after them. All development strategies require the involvement of women as central players. Such involvement is also a tool for preventing conflict and building peace. And the premise for peace is an understanding, or at least willingness, to be open for a multitude of cultures and visions. Hence the need to bring the language of women to the fore. This is indeed the gist of the UN Secretary Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, that the voices or languages of women be heard through participation in decision-making, peace negotiations, and post-conflict reconstruction efforts. This initiative is an example of increased awareness in international institutions of the centrality of gender issues and concerns. But we also need to make sure that international organizations such as the UN do not violate their own resolutions by ignoring the gender contents in peace negotiations, and has been the case in the past. A recent report on women in agriculture highlights the need for land rights for women and for women's education in general, and in the agricultural sector in particular. Exploitation, often by the powerful few, of natural resources, such as forests, land, water, fisheries, has harmed the most vulnerable people who depend on natural resources for their livelihood. Women, in particular, face a serious gender gap in access to productive resources, to income, and to new modern techniques. Many more women than men die in climate-related natural disasters, such as flooding. Thus, 70 to 80% of the casualties after the 2004 Asian tsunami were women. When floods wash away crops and livestock, or when earthquakes or famine occur, such disasters unleash a whole chain of events. Children, especially girls, are taken out of school and put to work. Unemployed youth resort to crime and antisocial behavior. Instances of domestic violence soar. There is an exacerbation of social, ethnic and racial tensions. Disputes over natural resources and property rights escalate, and the poor, of which 70% are women, are always disproportionately affected. Yet, despite gender imbalance, women play a pivotal role in supporting households and communities, in mitigating the effects of and adapting to climate change. Across the developing world, women's leadership in natural resource management is well known and recognized. This includes the management of water, forests and biodiversity. Such contribution is required, for it has been predicted that climate change will magnify existing patterns of disparities and discrimination. Indeed, the failures to respond to the problem can often be traced to the social economic imbalances created by gender inequality. The empowerment of women is thus a key precondition for dealing not only with climate issues but also with the consequences such as environment degradation and natural disasters. When it comes to battling gender equality in the economy, capacity building and education are key factors. I want to highlight one educational project that is dedicated to this task. It is the Gender Studies and the Training Programme, GEST, at the University of Iceland. It aims to promote women's empowerment through the education and training of fellows from poor countries and conflict or post-conflict societies. The programme is academically independent but funded by the Icelandic Foreign Ministry as part of government's development policy. It was officially launched in January 2009 and has received students from Palestine, Afghanistan, Mozambique and Uganda. A part of the transnational equality educational agenda, GEST focus on how social, economic, cultural and political processes which contribute to the subordination of women can be transformed. It can be transformed. It uses gender approaches in the sectors of environment, sustainable development and natural resource management. A pivotal element here involves the power relation between men and women over resource access and control and their concrete expressions in conflict, cooperation and coexistence over environments and livelihoods. Such an approach involves uneasy negotiation between theory, policy and practice, which are often evident within the realm of gender, environment and natural resource management, especially where gender is understood as a political, negotiated and contested element of social relationship. This brings me to my final point: the need to be open to new ideas about and approaches towards development of women's empowerment, and be prepared to abandon strategies that have not worked in the past. The Partnership for Change programme stresses innovative ways of achieving the goal of creating a sustainable future locally and globally. We should also be prepared to rethink categories such as developed and developing as analytical concepts, if they are to be of use in combating poverty, environmental threats, gender and social exclusion and war, for they reflect the inherently politicized meanings of the terms development, sustainability and reconstruction. There is always a risk of being trapped in an unfruitful north-south monologue, which will only raise new social and cultural barriers. Ladies and gentlemen, thus the question of gender equality has to be addressed in a broad sense, cutting across societal sectors. Thank you very much for your attention. As you feel, this lies on my heart, and especially the children that have to suffer for this incredible inequality between men and women. And we are privileged here in the North. It's less here than elsewhere in the world. Thank you.